Hi, and welcome to Data Futurology, the podcast where we unlock the secrets, tips, tricks, and mistakes of world-class data science executives and leaders. My name is Felipe Flores. I am your host. I'm a data science executive, and I'm currently working in a healthcare AI company. Thank you so much for being on the show. For the regular listeners, you may have noticed that we have been running live webinars. So thank you very much for everyone that has been coming to those. We've had a few hundred people coming to every webinar. We're doing them as live conversations with a guest and getting audience questions throughout. If you're interested to find out about our webinars, please go and sign up on the website on datafuturology.com. And obviously all the webinars are free and accessible, and we've had great feedbacks of them so far. Today, my guest is Maria Aretulaki. She is a very, very impressive data science leader. She has been working in voice for about 25 years. So definitely like an early pioneer in voice. She is one of the leaders in the field. And she tells us about what voice user interface design is, how voice has evolved, the usage of voice, both analysis and generation, how that has evolved in business. And over the past about 12 years, she started her own business, which is Dialogue Connection. And she tells us about the work that they've been doing there as well. She is extremely impressive. I learned so much speaking with her. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Here is the episode with Maria.
Maria, thank you so much for making the time. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm great, thank you. We have amazing weather here in the UK, and we are allowed to go out for a bit, so it's perfect.
Wow, that is great to hear. Good
Yeah.
turnaround.
Yeah.
I wanted to start a discussion by asking you about your origin story and how you got started in the world of data. You are such a pioneer. You got into the space so
Quite
early. Yeah, how did that happen? That you were how did you get into the data space in the first place?
Right. So originally I was a linguist, theoretical linguist. So I started off in the humanities. I studied English literature and linguistics. And
Amazing.
after my first degree, I mean, I wanted to come come and live and study in the UK because obviously, having studied English, that was the natural thing for me to do. But so when I was looking to do a master's, I was looking at I was trying to get funding, and apparently they were giving funding for translation.
Yeah.
But I wasn't particularly interested in translation. But in looking through the list of available courses and masters, I found this course in Manchester, where I still am, on machine translation. And I was like, oh, machine
Yeah.
translation, that's translation, but it's also computing. And I wanted to go into computing anyway. I had started back then in my summers, I was doing like a course in BASIC. And back then there was no internet actually. So
Yeah.
we're talking that basic course was in 87 or something, in 87. And so when by the time I was looking to do a master's, that was 91. And in 91, I came to Manchester to study machine translation. And that was basically my transition to computational linguistics. And
Where did you come from? Sorry.
oh, sorry, Greece.
Oh, nice. Yes.
You cannot tell already from my accent. And and that was the first I was hearing about machine translation or even computational linguistics. And
Yes.
I was like, oh, great, I want to go into computing. It's relevant to linguistics. That's interesting. And during my master's here in Manchester, I I learned another programming. Well, I actually properly learned a programming language. It was Prolog back then, which is like Lisp. It's declarative, or was. I'm not sure it still exists. A declarative programming language, and that was actually so interesting because I needed to think of the rules I had to define, but at the same time I was defining the whole world that I wanted to define, and that was
Yes.
it was just a completely new perspective into things. And I mean, obviously back then machine translation was already actually it was kind of hand. It was like manual rules, right? Where you were defining how a Spanish sentence was could be switched, could be translated into an English sentence, and what you switch around, what you maybe can get rid of, or in the case of Greek, you don't always need to specify the subject, or the word order can be random because from the cases and the inflection who is the subject, who is the object, etc. But anyway, that was like my introduction to the world of machine learning, really, because I needed to teach the computer how to understand one language and translate it into a different language, and so how to think in terms of rules and context and all kinds of things. And then after my master's, like the natural progression was to do a PhD, and I got funding from Canon, actually, the printing company.
Yeah. Wow.
I got a PhD scholarship to I actually work on dialogue systems, but I rebelled because I discovered neural networks. And I was like, I want to do something with neural networks. I discovered neural networks, and I thought it's like as if I had discovered God. It's like, oh my God, this has to be the answer to everything. And so basically, I decided to use artificial neural networks to do automatic text summarization. So still working with text input, right? Not speech, where I am in now, space I am in now. So
and this is in the early 90s, right?
That was 93 when I discovered neural networks.
Amazing. Okay, sorry, continue.
So yeah, I thought that for my research, because language is complex, and because back then, the existing research was, we use neural networks to maybe learn how to pronounce words, like very basic level. And I was thinking, how am I gonna use neural networks to do like high level processing, as would be required in text summarization. So I thought, okay, maybe we can use a hybrid system where some bits, the bits that symbolic processing can do the best, we use symbolic processing for that, and the more fuzzy processing, like which original sentences in a news article can be used for producing the summary of that article. So deciding importance, I thought that's a fuzzy thing. Even humans do not agree. I mean, like humans deciding on which sentences in a news article are important and should be included in the summary. Agreement among humans was, I don't remember exactly now, but I think it wasn't more than like 58%. So a neural network getting like 56% was already big for me. So anyway, basically neural networks, I discovered the fact that there were actually, even back then, I think I remember I attended an AI workshop on basically combining hybrid approaches, combining symbolic with connectionist processing. So even back then, it was people were considering this, and but of course back then neural networks were quite basic. We didn't have anywhere near the amount of data we have now. So yeah. Anyway, after my PhD, I got an EU scholarship to do a postdoc in Germany. So that brought me from the UK to Germany for the first time ever. I wasn't speaking German. I had never been to Germany. But yeah, that was the postdoc was on spoken dialogue systems and spoken dialogue management. And that's what got me into speech back in 96. And since then, I was in academia for a while. Then I switched to a research institute, which was like a mixture of academia and industry. I was project manager or local coordinator on a big German project funded by the German Ministry for Education or something. And that was actually the precursor to the Internet of Things, really, more or less, or voice assistants, because we were using speech to control. It was a multimodal assistance for the house, the car, and public terminals. And we were considering scenario like choosing a crime film to watch on TV, and the assistant would go through all the channels and all the titles and find the right genre and the right program that plays at the specific time window specified, whatever. And then you say, and make the room darker, so you would dim the light and draw the curtains. So all these things that we are now doing. That was a German research project back then. Obviously, like 20 different partners, all the white goods German companies like Grundig and Loewe and Siemens anyway. And so, yeah, a big research project. But yeah, that was something that is being done now. That was like a approach to the problem back then.
When was that?
Even back. Sorry.
When was that? When you were doing that project? Yeah.
Okay, that was 98 to 2000.
Oh my God! Wow. And where were you based in Germany? Was that after your postdoc?
That was Bavaria. So I was in the same place where I went for my postdoc. So that was the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, which is one of the most innovative. I see now on LinkedIn they're doing great things still. It was the Department for Pattern Recognition, and so they were doing image processing and speech processing.
Well, we could say the same about you. So innovative, working on these things, so far in advance of when the rest of the world would get to see them. Neural networks in the 90s, NLP, Internet of Things. This is amazing. So this was part of the research institute that was sort of part research, part academia. Part research, part industry. Sorry.
Yeah. So that was the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, but also some other universities, and it was actually called the Bavarian. Oh God, I remember it in German. It was called FORVIS, the Bavarian Research Center for Knowledge-Based Systems. So yeah, AI, basic AI, I guess, but also actually applied AI, because they were always involving industrial partners in every research project. And by that time, after so many years in academia, my first degree, my master's, my PhD, the postdoc, by that time I was ready for industry. And also, with the flirting with industry through that project anyway, I was like, I'm ready now. I want to get my hands dirty in industry. And the first thing I did was join a startup. And that was 2000. And that was the internet bubble that 3 years later burst.
Yes.
I joined a company that used to be called Enterprise back then. They quickly switched changed the name to Semantic Edge. and they still exist now after after they went bust and there was a management buyout. The company still exists. It's still, I think, rather small. I mean, back then it became, it's like small, big, massive, and then
And
now
the bubbles.
it's small, but they're still going after all these years, because as I said, I joined them in 2000, and that's what got me into the world of IVRs, which is the interactive voice response systems, like call center automation systems that use speech recognition, really. Speech recognition that is speaker independent. So it has to work for anyone calling, right? And that was my introduction to the world of data, because obviously in order to recognize all kinds of speakers with all kinds of age, sex, accents, even having a cold, being angry, whatever, all kinds of different speech signals. You need to have trained the speech recognition systems on massive amounts of real world data. And that's basically that was my introduction into the world of big data. IVRs, speech IVRs. As I said in the beginning, through a startup, then I started working for bigger and ever bigger speech companies until 2008, when and you have to think back then. I mean, all this time, right, from 2000, I was basically doing voice user interface design.
Yeah.
Or what we now call, all the voice first, voice design, VUX, voice user experience, and VUI design. But up until then, because I was still in Europe, right, Germany, IVRs were not that big in Europe. So my role was very small, and for every project, I mean, usually we're approaching people to do a project, but rarely would it go live, materialize. So it was more or less mainly pre-sales, trying to show how the system would work, example dialogues and stuff like that. But it hadn't taken off yet, and so my role was quite limited. So in 2008, I set up my own consultancy, Dialogue Connection, that I've been working through since.
Nice.
So, past 12 years on, and less than a year later, things started taking off. And I have been lucky to, have always had consulting work, because, there are so many IVRs now also in Europe, and so many IVRs to build, so many existing IVRs to fix. There's always something to do. And obviously with the advent of, Siri, and then later all the, Alexa and all the voice assistants now, there's also that type of work, the IVRs always, but also voice assistants. And with voice assistants, I mean, there are two different types of systems. They have loads of similarities, but also loads of differences, and I can talk about those later. But anyway, talking about my introduction and how I got into data science, through these real world projects and real world IVRs, I have analyzed myself thousands and thousands of hours of real calls with callers with IVRs, then callers with agents after speaking to an IVR or after failing with an IVR, complaining about the IVR in the queue, or later with the human agent. I've analyzed thousands of hours, and that's so invaluable, because you see how the IVR is really doing, how people are really reacting to what the IVR says and how it says it. Obviously, grammar, coverage, and things like that. But also, you get an insight into things you haven't even thought about, like not just me as a designer, but also like the business units. You may discover that people keep asking for a specific service that you're not offering, and then they're thinking, oh, maybe we should offer that. That's a good idea. We need to look into this. So that's where I also realized, the massive difference between obviously handcrafted recognition grammars. How we expect the user to say, I want to book a hotel. We used to do that many, many decades ago. And of course, that can only work in very specific and perfect cases. So going from that to spontaneously spoken speech with a couple of cuffs in the middle and your child shouting in the back and a dog barking nearby and a car alarm going off, it's like you need data to be able to recognize the specific intent you're after, but with all that stuff going on.
Exactly. Wow. No, are you kidding me? That is so impressive. That is so impressive. And I want to ask you so many things. I'll start by asking you about the lessons from your time at startups and small to medium companies. What were some of the lessons that you learned during that time that then helped you start your own company in the future?
Well, obviously, even having seen everything, working on your own company doesn't. You're never that prepared.
I agree completely.
Because obviously, even when I was working at the startup, well, okay, number one, there is no 9 to 5, right? Number one. There wasn't with a startup, there isn't with my own company. It's like with a startup, you are expected to get there like by 10 o'clock, which is late, but you're not really supposed to leave before 7. And then you have the after work drinks, which is also work. So very, very long, extremely fun, but very, very long days. So with both startups and your own company, work and life mix a lot. There is a massive amount of multitasking always. But yeah, flexibility and multitasking and resilience are the main lessons. You need to have many hats. You need to do like your technical thing, but also learn how to be a business person and how to sell yourself and do a bit of marketing and a bit of business development and a bit of content management and a bit of copywriting. Trying to sell yourself, your service, trying to refine your USP. What is different about my startup or what is different about my consultancy. That is always going on. But yeah, long hours, flexible working, multiple hats, resilience, and
Tell me more about the resilience, because what I found is in the bigger the company, the more stable the emotional ride is. That in a big company you might have good weeks and bad weeks, and you might have good few months where you're like slowly building up to something and you get to a really good place, and then you slowly start to taper down, and that might take several months in a big company. The smaller the company, the shorter the cycles. And in a startup, at least from my experience, what it's felt like, it's like a roller coaster ride that is just up and down, where you might have a good hour and then the next hour is terrible, and then the next hour it's good. So tell me more, how has it been in your experience, the ride in startups, both while working in startups and your own company, and how have you developed the resilience required to make it through all this time?
Right. Oh God. So yeah, like you said, both with startups and with your own consultancy, you have the good hours, good days, good weeks, good months, good years, and the fact, I guess it was never like as bad as a bad year. but you may have a month of a lull, and then a month where 5 different projects are landing at the same time. And then, of course, so basically, what you quickly learn is that in the quiet times, you learn to really relax because there's about to be a storm around the corner. So trying to reserve energy. Yeah, that is definitely something that I realize now I must have been making. And then also that every single connection is valuable, even if they're in a different industry. Whether they were a potential customer, an existing customer, not even a customer, like someone through someone you went to the same school with, they can always provide a new idea or a new valuable connection, either directly to them or through another connection that they have as a third, like a fifth, sixth degree of a connection kind of thing. So yeah, learning to use the quiet moments to your advantage, learning to see connections and getting new ideas through different avenues and even unexpected avenues. I guess these would be 2 things I can immediately think of.
Yeah, no, definitely. And what has kept you going through the tough times? I know that in my case, like sometimes I'm generally a positive and optimistic person, and which is why I end up, in startups. I think to a large degree because I can see a positive future. But regardless of that, there are times where things get really tough, and you have a few too many bad hours in a row, and then that starts to sort of mount up. And I've definitely found myself in times where I'm just like, oh, what the hell am I doing? Why did I put myself in this position? I could be having an easier life if I had made different decisions.
Yeah, that's true.
Should I keep going? And I found that in myself, in my case, and I'd love to hear how you get through those tough times, because in my case, obviously, I really lean on my loved ones, but I also know that I need to take a break, that I need to go and do something different for a bit, and I find that in my case, I've learned that I don't ask for help enough from in general. So both from my team and from my loved ones. So then I tend to just like carry more and more burden, and then it ends up like crushing me. And then I go, oh, I should speak with my team.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
So tell me, how's it been for you?
The same thing, yeah. I guess one thing that has kept me going is thinking, I've put so much energy and
Yes.
sweat, blood, and tears into other people's companies. Why should I stop for my own? Like that has been something that has always kept me going, because in the times where like VUI designers were like an exotic animal, and people were saying, okay, what do you do again here? Oh yeah, whatever. In those times, obviously, I was feeling worthless. And then I set up my own company. More people need VUI designers. I have my customers who actually, that was also one thing that I noticed when I was working for companies. I don't know. I see the attitude, the client attitude seems to be different. When I'm an employee, they see me as, or I got the feeling that I was like, it was more impersonal. Like they were seeing my company in me. They were not seeing me. Whereas my clients through my consultancy, like they come to me and they seem to be grateful for what I bring as a, I personally bring. And or maybe it's also part of the timing, because I said back then there wasn't much, it wasn't a clear role, whereas now it is, and people need it and they seek it out rather than us back then trying to justify a role. But yes, through that, and having gone through this lack of appreciation when working at companies, and getting appreciation working for my own consultancy, like that already makes all the extra effort and sweat and tears worth it. Because as I said, when I was working for other companies, and people may not appreciate my input, and it was still painful, and I was still doing my best. And then now, if I do the same and people appreciate it, but I need to do extra work because there's, I don't know, 2 competing deadlines or something, then I felt more motivated, because I was already feeling more appreciated, and also because I wanted my consultancy to make it, because I've made other people's companies make it, kind of, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's really nice. I'm really glad I asked that. That is a really good perspective to say, like, why would you give up on your own company and efforts when you have it in for other people's. And I love the fact that that people are able to appreciate your unique value more when you have your own company. That's really great. That's really great to hear. Did you notice that happen slowly over time, or was it a big change that you noticed when you started your company?
But a bit of both, because I felt that I had more, so let's say, prestige, or more prestige and more gravitas through my own company. I don't know, because it is a company. It's not like I'm not self-employed. I set up a limited company, and maybe people know that by doing this, that is a big commitment, and maybe I had already proven my commitment through setting up my company, and people can see that. But as I said, at the same time, there was also, the timing was great, because a couple, was it 2 years later that Siri came out, and then then everybody started having smartphones, everybody had voice recognition on their phone, so people were getting more familiar with speech recognition. Whereas before it was like, oh, you work on IVRs, oh, you mean the things where you press 1 or 2 and they fail, which was nothing like I was doing. And many people still think that IVRs is, the touchstone DTMF type of systems. And of course, DTMF can always be used. It's a great fallback thing if nothing else works, if it's very loud or whatever. But what was I saying? And so there was a natural progression also of the market, where voice speech recognition became more mainstream, because people had it in their pockets. And then, of course, later, was it 2014 or something, with the advent of Alexa? Now it's also cool, and it's in your home, and it's everywhere, because also Amazon as a big player. I mean, everybody was already kind of shopping through Amazon, so it's a big name. Therefore, the smart speaker is also like automatically had great exposure, and it became more easily, like the reach was massive and immediate. So it was a natural progression in that speech recognition and voice has become more relevant through time. But as I said, I believe I'm right in my feeling or memory or both, that also having set up my own limited company automatically meant that I am committed, and I'm like committed and persistent, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't it interesting as humans that we have to send the right signals,
Yes.
like and that those signals are yeah, picked up, and it's so important, and that then they by sending those signals, it really influences our behavior so much, as well as obviously the behaviors of others. That's really interesting. So tell me, what does a what does a typical project look like for you, if obviously if there's such a thing, and if you can tell us
Right.
about some of the interesting examples or stories that you've seen in the last few years, obviously examples that you can share, but what would a typical project for you look like?
Right. So most of the times and I guess that must go against the current agile development. Most of the time there was a lot of to and fro with the client to specify the requirements for the design. So what should the system be doing? What kind of persona it should be exhibiting? What specific tasks the user should be able to do with your system? What kind of user groups they represent? Age and familiarity with systems, familiarity with your subject matter. So a lot of work going on requirement specification, meaning meetings with the client, presenting call flows, presenting sample dialogues, presenting persona profiles, for the system. Things that
That
could
is,
take a couple of months, really.
yeah, exactly, I can imagine. That is really interesting, because I do think that one of the areas where agile can hurt you as a business, and can hurt you in your projects, is that the bias towards action before clearly defining a problem. And I know that in myself, like I've made this mistake many times, to say, like, let's just start and the answer will emerge. And especially when it's in data science, like, they're complex problems, and so much is dependent on clearly defining what the outcome is, how it's going to be used, what good looks like. That once, if at least I've learned by making the mistake many times, if you don't have that North Star, then you could spend months of agile work where you're busy, and then you look up and you're nowhere near to where
Right.
something that's useful. So I do agree that, and I see it completely necessary to have clarity and agreement on the output and how it's going to be used, etc., and defining the problem and having clarity in the solution. And so I wonder if the expectations from the clients, if you think that they sit on that side, on clearly defining outcomes, or do you think that the requirement specification start to go into a deeper design that essentially is trying to prevent too many problems ahead of time? Where do you think in the spectrum between agile on one side, a good balance, and then completely have everything planned on the other side?
My experience has been that like my client, I mean the end client, the business people, almost have visibility over both the need for detailed design and things that they really need to sign off beforehand, and the pressures of having to deliver, having a specific deliverable deadline, whatever, 1 month down the line or 2 months down the line. So there's always tension between, or in my experience, maybe now things are completely different, and I'll talk about that too. VUI designers have always fought with the software engineers and the coders, because as you say, the coders want to start coding away, and they cannot see the point of spending a week or let alone a month trying to specify exactly what the system should be able to do. They just want to make sure that things work, whatever database calls work or things like that, which are of course valuable, but to say do away with detailed design is suicide, because there are so many things you need to take into consideration beforehand, and so that you can keep consistency in the course of the project, and even so that you have the system modular enough to be agile enough to basically modify and bring in new specifications or make extensions and tiny changes or even bigger changes further down the line. So there's this tension between the UI designer and the coder. And I found in some cases, I've had customers where they say, oh, I see your point, UI designer, I see your point, coder, let's do something, whatever. And we kind of find some agreement in the middle. So yeah, instead of spending a month on design, let's spend at least a week on design and then, get on with it. But I found it interesting that I've seen actually wisdom in business circles. But of course, there are also sometimes there are also the marketing guys who may promise too much to the end customer, things that neither the VUI designer nor the coder will agree with. And then there are arguments with them. But I found that like pure business people have sometimes have more wisdom than the coders, and definitely than the marketing guys. So, but yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've had many arguments in my working life, and as you say, when I happen to it's like in considering the agile management, the definition of agile, an agile project, it's like, oh my god, this is exactly the definition of my worst nightmare. Start coding without designing anything and hope for the best. It's like, no. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, it definitely has its flaws. I completely agree with that. So there's definitely a need for clarity and specification up front, and what happens after that in a usual project for you, and how's that's those next stages?
So yeah, then you start having okay, then you try to create some kind of mock-ups, which in my case it's usually example dialogues, how things will progress both in a normal flow, in a normal scenario, and so the different scenario, both the good ones and the bad ones, you didn't recognize, the system doesn't have that bit of information, or there is you cannot connect to the back end, or you also try to define and exemplify bad scenario and like suboptimal scenarios too. And through those, even both the coder and the business guys and the marketing guys will see that there are some things they really need to sign off early on. Like, if the system fails 3 times, what do we do? Do we send the caller to a call center agent, or do we keep them in a loop because we really need them to do everything, to self-serve? These are things you really need to design up front, because there's no point in, how can you start coding before deciding whether you need to hand off to an agent, to a human, or maybe hand off to a different automated system say, a purely DTMF system, for example, when you give up on speech, or these are things you need to decide on early on. And through these example dialogues, you can see all the different potential pain points, as well as things like how will my system sound if I use a casual language, or will it sound too stuck up if I use too formal language and things like that.
Yes.
And then through defining the language of the system, you and also the actual how you formulate a question, that will also determine the kind of grammar you want to be able to, the kind of language coverage you want the system to be able to have. Do I just ask them, what can I help you with today? Or, or do I say, oh, with our system, you can check your balance and make a payment. What would you like to do? Specify and limit limit the expectations of the user, really. So through these example dialogues, you can think about and decide the persona of the system, the grammar complexity, the language that the system uses, how formal and informal it can be, and then you create a mock-up, and then there's loads of cycles of internal testing, and then you try it out on a specific percentage of the real caller population, and then you do speech analytics and you analyze real world, real recordings to see how people are doing with the system, how is your system doing, how people react to it, and what types of things we don't yet cover. And then it's an endless cycle, basically, of a tuning cycle and call monitoring tuning that may happen every 6 months or every year or something, depending on the willingness of the client.
Correct. Yeah.
And also,
and what are some things that some interesting things that you found when you do speech analytics, either for other systems that have been in place or when you've gone back to look at your systems?
right.
Do you have any examples or stories that you can share about anything interesting or memorable that has come up?
Well, first of all, it's hugely entertaining because there are loads of swear words, as you can imagine. And some of them are so innovative, but I will not repeat them here because I'm not going to get blocked. Very innovative swearing, yes. Very original swearing. I also found equally entertainingly that some, I guess, older users, because obviously we don't know, in the systems I've worked on, it's pretty much impossible to identify who is speaking in the recordings, unless they actually say their name and their account number or whatever that I could check later, kind of thing. But that's more, that usually doesn't happen because usually the speech recordings come with the sensitive data being like bleeped out anyway.
Yes.
But anyway, you can tell from the voice quality that someone is an older user and perhaps do not know the concept of an IVR, and that there may be an automated system speaking so naturally and non-robotically, because nowadays, of course, we also use, you don't use TTS, you use recordings with voice talent, so that means with real actors. So it sounds really natural, and of course, some people think, oh, it understood what I just said, and I didn't just say press 1. So, and it speaks naturally, it must be a human. And so I've heard many older ladies and gentlemen say, oh, thank you, love, or, oh, that's really nice of you, as if they were speaking to a young lady on the other side of the phone. So that was also that's always surprising to see those people who think they're speaking to a human. And of course, all the more blunt but very important things of saying, like something that did come up, how you formulate a question is really important, because like if you say something like, and do you have your account number? That's a tricky question, because someone may just say yes, but the specific system may be actually listening for the account number. So are you just listening for a yes, or are you listening for a yes? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you are expecting the latter, you're gonna fail, because you're gonna say, I didn't get an account number. I just said, please tell me your account number. You just created an extra step there for no reason. You confused the caller for no reason, and you had them in the IVR for longer because your question was not clear. So, things like that, or even things like when you give your account number and it's got, say, I don't know, 8 digits. How many people give it in like natural? How many people use natural numbers like 28, 75, 68?
Yes.
Like how many people would say 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7? Like how many groupings do they use? How much silence they leave? How much do they pause between number groups? And these are things that come up when you study the recordings. And of course, they will determine how you tune the system afterwards to, say, change the timeout settings so that you let the caller, you give the caller more time to say an 8-digit number, because they pause between groups of, threes or whatever. So yeah, these are things that came up, but yeah, swearing is always fantastic. And also interesting also how because in a system, like in an ideal world, whatever the IVR has recognized should come up on the call center agent screen.
Yes.
So that they don't repeat some questions. So sometimes you would often hear callers say, "Oh, I just gave the system my account number. Why do I need to give it again?" And maybe the agent already has it on the system, but they need to confirm for security reasons, and then so it's tricky. But yeah, it's also interesting to hear what people say while waiting on hold for an agent. What they say about the company, what they say about the system. I just repeated my account number 5 times and didn't get it. Stupid system or whatever. Or they may complain about the company. This is the 5th time I'm calling, and after getting through the IVR, I never, I wait in an endless queue. And then, what do you do about having people wait in a queue? Do you try to keep them in the IVR for longer so that they don't have to wait in a queue? Do you play ads in the queue, or will that irritate them even more? It's like a treasure.
Correct.
It's a treasure chest of information.
Exactly. Like, do you give them disclaimers to prepare them for the type of discussions they're going to have? It's really interesting, and it's the face of the company with the customer. That's why it's so important, because essentially everything that the company does just comes into that contact with the customer. So you're representing the entire company. So tell me, where do you see IVRs going in the future, and the voice UI design, the fact that this is the face of the company, this is the main interaction that people would have when they reach out to the company. They might be getting services delivered in the background, but whenever they need something, this is the
right, yeah.
The representative. Where do you think this area is going in the future?
Right. So first of all, I want to say that, of course, in the meantime, we've also had the explosion of chatbots.
Yes.
So this means the same companies try to automate kind of the same types of tasks through, chat, text-based. And then the challenge is to integrate the channel so that if you jump from one channel to the next, it can be smooth and seamless, and the information carries on to the other channel. Of course, still preserving the same, like the brand and all the things, but also managing user expectations. So, what can the IVR do? What can the chatbot do? What do I get to do with a human agent if I get to one later? What do I do? What kind of information, confirmation, or whatever I get through SMS? So that's a thing that is happening now everywhere. So most companies will not only have an IVR now; they're also moving to the chatbots, but that doesn't mean that IVRs will go away, because some people always prefer to speak to someone on the phone, and of course the IVR will always be useful in trying to route in Australia too.
Yes.
The call to the right department, to the right call center agent group, so that you don't have to go through endless conversations and be put on hold to a different agent and all that. You try to get to the right type of agent skill first time. And so in terms of IVRs, I think that even if I never design a new IVR from scratch ever again in my life, I will always have work trying to make existing IVRs more usable, because there are so many really bad IVRs out there, because they were probably designed ages ago. Because they were designed by a coder, not a VUI designer. And also because other expectations change, people get more familiar with speech recognition, with IVRs themselves, etc. I've also designed or been involved with chatbots too, and then you can start with a chatbot, and then they give you a link, and you connect to an IVR. That can still be the case. But what is definitely interesting is now with the advent of the smart speakers, many people want to get on that bandwagon too, and they are quite similar, but there are so many differences too, because you have so many challenges. You have the issue that the voice assistant is working with many different skills. So this means that it doesn't only work with, say, I've got an IVR for, say, I'm a bank, and I've got an IVR for my bank and a chatbot for my bank, and I also want an Alexa skill. So if the user has activated, has got multiple, or say just two, but different bank skills, one for whatever, HSBC, and one for Barclays. And the challenge is when you say something like, I want to check my balance, you need to somehow, the voice assistant needs to somehow design which skill do I, what initiative do I get, which skill do I present first? Do I say, oh, you usually like the logic? He usually brings up the HSBC skill, so I'll just offer that straight away for convenience. And maybe they can say, no, actually, I want the Barclays one. So this, they call it the discoverability thing. So which skill should get activated, and how you switch between them. I may want to do something with the HSBC one, and then I want to do something with the other one, and How will that switch happen? And then the other one is, of course, that through using Alexa or Google Assistant or Bixby, you don't no longer have access to the recordings that you have through the IVR.
Correct.
For privacy and security and all these things. I mean, security, yeah, privacy issues. So this means that it's difficult to know when you try to analyze the data for your skill. You know, how good did my HSBC skill do? It's difficult to know what users really said when it failed, or why do most users stop at that step? We don't know, because I don't know, Alexa or the Google Assistant thought it recognized this, so it should have worked. Why didn't it? We don't know. So that's a big challenge, and that is one reason why. I mean, right now I see it as very difficult, of course, for Amazon or Google or Samsung to say, okay, developers of the world, here are all the recordings, do whatever you want with them. Very, very difficult. So then there needs to be a different solution, which is it's very difficult. So that is why I don't see IVRs going away, because if you want that level of granularity into the data so that you can do speech analytics and tuning and get more insight into what your customers really want and where they fail and what your pain points are, I don't see IVRs going away. But of course, I see more and more adoption of skills and actions and capsules and all these different modules. But then, of course, as I said, we have the the problem of competing similar skills.
Yes.
And
yes.
So yeah, the future the future is multicolor. The future is multicolor, but yeah, as I said, I don't think IVRs are going away.
Exactly. And a lot of demand for NLP practitioners and
yes.
to work across the board. This is
At the same time, I need to, sorry. At the same time, I need to point out, but with the advent of the smart speakers and all the different skills and all that, because you have so many people, of course, who want to get into voice, right? They're not VUI designers. They are either coders, which is the same problem that I addressed about, it's like, well, what was happening with the IVRs and the eager coders who want to get on with it, and they made design decisions by themselves. With the smart speaker skills, actions, and capsules, you have people who have who are not designers designing. They're also not linguists, and they take decisions on how to ask a question, and they may be too formal. They may say, like, oh, I don't recognize this input, which is something a designer would never, ever, ever write in a prompt. So you have people who are not linguists, they're not VUI designers. They may be designers of web apps or like visual designers, but also that doesn't make you a voice designer. Or they may come from marketing, and they're used to writing copy, but that's not copy for speech recognition, because they don't know how speech recognition works. So while skills and actions and capsules are becoming more prevalent, and companies that have an IVR or now also chatbot, they also want to get into that space. I see more and more skills and actions capsules designed by people who don't know how language words, speech recognition works, user experience for voice works, spawning out quickly bad skills, actions, and capsules. And that will be a massive challenge now, to not bring everyone else down through quickly written and published skills, actions, and capsules. And but I think in the medium term, people will realize that thought needs to be put into the UI design and the language and the context and the persona, like it happened also with the IVRs. There were all the bad IVRs were also IVRs that people didn't design but developed robustly, but not paying attention to, not considering the linguistics aspects and the usability aspects, and people were burned, and then they tried to fix things, and probably the same thing will happen with smart speaker skills and actions and capsules too.
Exactly, and by having so many new ones coming in of probably average quality, hopefully it means that the good ones get to stand out, and then the bar raises from a user perspective. Maria, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your perspectives, everything that you've done.
I don't know. I think one of your questions was what I learned in the past 5 years. Was that one of the questions? I mean, I've told you a lot of things that I've learned, but I need to mention my 5-year-old. I need to mention my 5-year-old because I think one of the questions was one of the things you're most proud of. And I want to say that I'm most proud of how quickly I put him to sleep to make this recording.
That is a real challenge. Yes. Oh, well done. Thank you. Thank you so much. That brings this episode to conclusion. Thank you so much for listening. Please find us on datafuturology.com or on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram as Data Futurology. Also go to datafuturology.com/podcast to find the show notes for this and any other episodes. If you liked this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you could leave us a review wherever you listen to our podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it was helpful and valuable for you. Thanks again, and see you next time.